On a crisp November afternoon in Chicago, the city bustled with life. The wind whipped down Michigan Avenue, carrying with it the distinct chill of an impending winter. Among the throngs of shoppers and tourists, Donald Trump, clad in a long blue-black coat and his signature red tie, walked briskly along the crowded sidewalk. He was in town for a business meeting but had chosen to forego his usual motorcade, opting instead to experience the city's vibrant energy up close. As he approached a corner near Millennium Park, something caught his eye. Huddled against a cold stone building was a woman, her shoulders hunched and her hands trembling as they gripped a battered cardboard sign, "Veteran in need, please help." Her clothes were worn and tattered, her face etched with lines of fatigue and hardship. Donald stopped, his gaze locking onto hers. The bustling crowd moved around him like a river around a stone. Curiosity and concern pulled him closer. Ignoring the whispers and curious glances of passers-by, he stepped toward her. "Ma'am," he said gently, kneeling so they were at eye level, "what's your name?" The woman looked up, startled. For a moment, she seemed unsure if he was real. "It's Teresa," she said hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Teresa Hensley." Donald's eyes softened. "Teresa," he repeated. "You're a veteran?" She nodded, her hands fidgeting with the edges of the sign. "Yes, sir. U.S. Army. 12 years. Got injured overseas and, well, things haven't been easy since." His brow furrowed. "Why are you out here? Don't you have a place to stay?" She shook her head, her voice breaking as she replied, "Lost my apartment months ago. Couldn't keep up with the rent. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's hard." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Here was someone who had given years of her life in service to the country, now reduced to begging on the streets. He couldn't just walk away. Reaching into his coat pocket, Donald pulled out his phone. "Teresa, stay right here," he said firmly. "We're going to fix this." He stepped a few feet away and dialed his assistant, Margaret. The phone barely rang once before she answered. "Mr. Trump, what do you need?" "Margaret, find the nearest hotel with availability. Call a doctor, someone who can do a quick checkup. Tell them it's urgent," he instructed. "Right away, sir," she replied. Returning to Teresa, Donald knelt beside her again. "Help is on the way," he said reassuringly. "But first, let's get you something warm to eat." He flagged down a nearby food vendor and bought her a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich. As Teresa ate, her hands still shaking from the cold, Donald asked her about her life. She told him about her deployments, the friends she'd lost, and the injury that ended her career. She spoke of how difficult the transition to civilian life had been, the jobs she'd struggled to keep, and the loneliness that came with it all. "I tried reaching out for help," Teresa admitted, her voice breaking, "but the system's so overwhelmed, I just fell through the cracks." Minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Margaret had worked quickly. A well-dressed driver stepped out and opened the door. "Teresa," Donald said gently, helping her to her feet. "This is for you. We're taking you somewhere safe." Teresa hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Trump? You don't even know me." He looked her straight in the eye. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." The ride to the hotel was quiet, Teresa's exhaustion finally catching up with her. When they arrived, the staff, prepped by Margaret, greeted her like a VIP. She was escorted to a suite on the top floor, where a hot shower, fresh clothes, and a warm bed awaited her. A doctor arrived shortly after to examine her, providing much-needed medicine and advice on how to regain her health. Meanwhile, Margaret had contacted Veterans United Support Services, a nonprofit specializing in helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Within an hour, their representative, a cheerful woman named Lisa, arrived to meet Teresa. "Teresa," Lisa said warmly, sitting beside her, "we're going to help you with housing, job training, and anything else you need. You're not alone anymore." Tears welled up in Teresa's eyes as she looked at Donald, who stood quietly in the corner. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Trump." He stepped forward, his expression kind but firm. "You don't need to thank me, Teresa. You earned this a long time ago." By the next morning, Teresa had a new plan for her life. Veterans United had found her temporary housing, and Donald's foundation had offered to cover her rent for the first year. He even handed her a check to help with immediate expenses. As he prepared to leave, Teresa stopped him. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice steadier now, "you've changed my life in ways I can't describe. Thank you." Donald smiled. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "Pay it forward someday." Teresa nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. "I will." In the weeks that followed, Teresa began her new chapter. Veterans United helped her secure a part-time job and enroll in a skills training program. Slowly but surely, she regained her independence. One day, she received a call from Lisa. "Teresa, we have an opportunity for you," Lisa said. "We're organizing a fundraiser for homeless veterans. We'd like you to share your story." Teresa hesitated. Speaking in front of a crowd felt daunting, but then she remembered Donald's words. Pay it forward. On the night of the event, Teresa stood nervously behind the curtain, listening to the hum of the crowd. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Teresa Hensley," she said, her voice steadying as she spoke. "I served this country for 12 years. When I came home, I thought my battle was over. But I was wrong. I faced another fight. The fight to survive." She recounted her struggles, her despair, and the moment Donald Trump reached out a hand to help her. "That simple act of kindness saved my life," she said, her voice breaking. "And it reminded me that no one is truly alone." The audience rose to their feet, applauding with a fervor that brought tears to her eyes. Among them, Donald watched quietly, a small smile of pride on his face. Months later, Teresa stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of a new veteran housing facility funded by Donald's foundation. She had become an advocate for veterans' rights, working tirelessly to ensure others didn't face the same struggles she had. As Donald joined her at the podium, she turned to him and said, "You didn't just give me a second chance, Mr. Trump. You gave me a purpose." He shook her hand, his expression warm. "You did the hard part, Teresa. I just gave you a little push." As they stood there, the crowd cheering around them, it was clear that Teresa's story was just the beginning.